Our next guest, Tejaswin or TJ Shankar, is known as India's high jump star. A bronze medalist at the 2022 Commonwealth Games and a silver at the Asian Games, Shankar has set national records in the high jump, including a 2.29 clearance, and earned recognition globally with his victory at the 2023 New Balance Indoor Grand Prix in Boston. What sets Shankar apart is his recent venture into decathlon, where he scored an impressive 7,600 points in his first attempt, proving his adaptability and determination to excel across all 10 events. With a career built on resilience and a thirst for new challenges, Shankar continues to push the boundaries of his potential, making him one of the most exciting athletes to watch in the future of athletics. So Tejaswin, welcome to our show. It's an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by, you just won a medal at the recently concluded Asian Games, and in an event where you've sort of had a transition from high jump to the decathlon. It's new. I'm sure you've been preparing for it, but it's still new. And you've still gone out there, you set a new national record, and you won a medal. So tell us about what your expectations were leading into that event and how the overall experience was of it.
Yeah, it's a very, right now sitting here after, maybe a few months post Asian Games, it feels very easy to say that it was a great experience. But then leading up to the competition, I was definitely very tensed. It was an event that I've never competed in. It was something that, I didn't know what to expect, because I've competed in the high jump, individual high jump multiple times. But then when you're competing in 10 events, there's different skill sets, there's different, things involved in competing in 10 events. You're competing over 2 days continuously without, any breaks. So it's a huge challenge, and part of it's also, competing in an environment like the Asian Games, where you have the best athletes in Asia and you have to go head to head with those people, and you also have to try and win a medal. So the bottom line is, I was not expecting to medal there. My goal was to just go out there, participate and see where I stand. But then after the first few events, so in the decathlon, this might be one of your next questions, but I'm just skipping the line. And so in the decathlon, there's 10 events for the viewers as well. So you compete in 5 events over 2 days. So you compete in 10 events over 2 days. You have 5 events on either day. So you start off with the 100 meters, you do the long jump, you do the short put, you do the high jump, and then you finish off with the 400 meters. And that's the day 1. And then on day 2, you wake up, you do the 110 meter hurdles, throw the discus, do the pole vault, throw the javelin, and then finish off with a metric mile. That's the 1500 meters. So it tests your speed, tests your endurance, and all of the above. So day 1 is historically my stronger event, and there's this saying in the decathlon community that says day 1's for the athletes and day 2's for the decathletes. So day 1, since I'm a good athlete, day 1 was, after I finished day 1 at the Asian Games, I felt really strong, really competitive, because those are all athletic, fast, strong, explosive events. So if you're a good athlete, you'll be able to compete well in those events. But then day 2, the reason they say it's for the decathletes is because you have the hurdles, which is, as high as your hips. And you also have the fatigue of day 1. And you have to jump over 10 barriers. Then you have the discus, which is a very technical event. Then you have the pole vault, the dreaded pole vault, which for me, it's a very, it's a difficult event for me because I've never done the pole vault. And then you have the javelin, that's also a pretty technical event. And then you have the 1500 meter race, which is, you can be as good as you want in the 1500, but it's still a 1500 meter race. And to finish that, race, it just takes everything out of your body. So that was my experience at the Asian Games. I didn't expect anything out of it, didn't expect a medal, but then to, walk out of the Asian Games with a silver was a cherry on a cake.
It's huge. I think it's more than cherry on a cake, because yes, you say your best performances come from not going into them or those events with having expectations and pressure of that expectation. But what you've gone and basically done, and like you said, for viewers, to put it into perspective, is you've attempted something that you've never really attempted before at an international level on a stage as big as this. Yeah. You've had about a year or so, like you said, of intense preparation for it. But when you're describing the event as a whole, it's not just being so excellent in 10 events individually, but having the ability to put it all together. Yeah. And then having the endurance, the speed, the agility, everything that goes into being an all-round versatile athlete, which is what this event is. You've gone out there, you've not only qualified for Asian Games, that you've gone and won a medal at it. It must be huge, I think, for your confidence, saying that, okay, I'm going to try and attempt this, and you found success in it without expectation. But you are at your core, or at your start, a high jumper, right?
Absolutely.
You've, tell me, before we get to, more of the decathlon, I'd like to understand, when you were younger, what inspired you to choose the high jump as an event, or what made you feel that this is something that you would find excellence at?
So growing up, I had no clue about the high jump. I didn't even know that track and field as a sport existed up until the 2010 Commonwealth Games, which was held in Delhi.
Wow.
And I believe, did you compete at the 2010 Commonwealth?
I was in Delhi, yes.
So,
yes, I was.
So at that time, I had no clue about the Commonwealth Games, let alone track and field. So as a young kid, my parents, somebody gave tickets for the Commonwealth Games, and we ended up going and watching the track and field competitions, and we also saw weightlifting. But that's the only memory that I have of the 2010 Commonwealth Games, and I had no plans of competing in the high jump. And growing up, just like any other kid in Delhi, I used to play a lot of cricket, did a lot of swimming, played some tennis. So overall, I guess I was just very athletic growing up, and my parents always pushed me. And coming from a Tamil family, they made me sing, they made me play the mridangam. So I've done all of it. So growing up, it was just one of those, family atmospheres where you do everything growing up and then just see where you're good at. And then education was something that was really important for, my family. So in school, we had the opportunity to do all other sports. So cricket was my primary goal, and then one fine day we had a sports teacher walk into our school and he said, "Hey, why don't you try and do the high jump?" And I said, "Why
How
would I
old
do
were
that?"
you?
I was in 8th standard, so
Okay.
that's I think 13, 14, somewhere around
yeah.
there. So, and my logical question to him was, "Why would I do that? I want to play cricket." And then he said, "You can only play cricket at a high level if you're able to run behind the ball faster, and you're able to be more agile." I was a tall, lanky guy. I was about 6 feet when I was in 8th standard, but that was it. I couldn't run, I couldn't bend, I was a weakling. So to be able to have the ability to move around, be strong, be fit, be agile, I had to, he asked me to come and train with him in the mornings and then play cricket in the evenings. And then that's how he reeled me, and that's how you reel a fish. You throw the bait and then wait for it to catch. And then that's how, the moment I caught it, the moment I saw some success in the high jump, the moment I started doing multiple events, I felt a lot more fitter, stronger. My ball was going faster, and when I was bowling. So then I realized, okay, I'm onto something. And then that's how he hooked me onto track and field. And then slowly, steadily, I started following everything that he had to say about running, jumping, throwing, and then eventually I progressed into the high jump and saw early success, and that was it for me.
I think you've sort of found what you feel you're good at, and your core is in the high jump at 13 or 14. Today, that's, I think, not typically the age at which athletes figure out what they want to do. I think it's traditionally a little earlier. By the time they're 9 or 10 or 11, they sort of are already playing one sport very specifically, and training very specifically for one sport, and within that possibly one or two events. You've gone on from saying that I want to do the high jump, you found success at it, which is obviously spurred you on to focus in even more and find excellence at it, to now saying that I've done possibly all I can in the high jump, but it's not enough for me. I want more. And you've then said that I want more, and this is where I want to go in terms of the decathlon. You talk about certain events being your Achilles heel. So what, like I asked you for, high jump, what inspired you to make that transition from saying I'm great at the high jump, but now let me take on something that is possibly, much harder in terms of preparation at least?
So I'd like to address your first point before I address your second point. The first point was I found my success a bit later compared to other athletes, and I feel I'm a bit opinionated about this. I felt that I still found my success way earlier than I should have, because at 13, 14 you're still very young, and the reality is, yes, I could have. I was doing really well at that age group. I was able to break the national record for men when I was 17, but then how long was I able to sustain that? That's more important. So it doesn't matter how I can jump when I'm 20, but what matters is how long I can keep jumping high for, and that's how I think of it. So I really don't agree with kids and parents trying to really specialize when they're 9, 10. I really think
Correct.
that's very, very early. That's still you're very ripe. Your body is not you haven't grown into your full frame. So
Correct.
It's really hard to judge or to understand what your skill set might be, how it might look like when you grow up. So I think the biggest boon for me growing up was that the coach that initially spotted me or helped me pick the sport made me do multiple events and not just made me stick to the high jump, because had he done that, I probably would have had some sort of injuries and would have probably fell out of love for the sport. So it would have been very difficult.
Tell me a little bit more about your parents and the role that they had to play when you were, just getting into your teens with sport.
So growing up, my father was a lawyer, and then we come from I don't have a story about my sports or my lifestyle being very difficult growing up. We come from a well-to-do family, so it was never very difficult for me. But I think the difficulty for me was to leave the comfort and do something that they wanted me to do or I wanted to do myself, and still go through the motions of doing the hard labor of spending hours in practice or managing school with studies, doing sport, extracurriculars, all that sort of thing. So looking back, I felt everything just fell in place. But then I also lost my father when I was 14, so that was probably one of the most difficult challenges in my life growing up, because that was when I also started high jumping. So I didn't know if I should continue doing sport or if I just should stop competing in sports. And that's when I guess my mother and my sister and everybody, they were really there for me, and they said, what, just do what you want to do and just do what you have to do, because if you're happy, we're all going to be happy. And then I'm glad that they were there and said those words at that time, which eventually progressed into me doing what I'm doing now, and then having fun with my life and still being passionate about what I do, still trying to do good and make a name for myself. So
fantastic. I think that your dad would be very proud of who you've become, and more than that, who you chose to be at a time when you're 14. The world feels like it closes in on you, and then you have to deal with something as severe as a loss like that. Hats off to your mom, your sister and your family that basically all rallied around you to allow you to grow into who you are today. So I always, at the start of my conversations with our best athletes, I always try to find the inspirations or motivation behind what sparked that initial ignite that spark in them to be who they are. Your coach clearly did it for you. I'm not really going to call you a fish, but a fish out of water. They've reeled you in, and good he reeled you in. Good for
now.
India. But I think in India, to excel in sport, it has to be a combination of great teachers and a great family, which you clearly have, and it's paying off for yourself and also for the country. So just like Moha, nature's perfect formula, we have with us an athlete that today chooses to not only excel in one event individually, but takes on possibly the toughest event there is in athletics, the decathlon. Training for both events is possibly very different, but we'd like to hear more from him on his challenges and what he does to adapt, to transition, and again, to once again find excellence in the second event he does. So Tejaswin, let's start with high jump, because there are a lot of young athletes here who are waiting to listen to how you prepared, what sort of challenges you face in a sport that requires strength, I'm guessing, agility, speed, and also a whole lot of technique. So take us back to, say, training between the ages of 16 and 20 for the high jump, the sort of schedules you followed and the challenges you may have faced through it.
So growing up, and I think before and we discuss any schedules, any training plans, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, and the reason I found my success was because I trusted my coach, I trusted what they had to say, and that was it. It doesn't, for me, it didn't matter who, what his background was, what his achievements were, but there was something deep within me that knew that whatever he's telling me is what I'm supposed to do. And it was, of course, you have to be rational and you have to make sure that it's the right things that you're listening to, but at the same time, the input that he gave, I really believed that that's going to take me to the next level, and that was part of it, that I was able to make it. Because you see a lot of coaches, that they have a lot of athletes and not everybody achieves the same level of success, but that doesn't mean the coach is good or bad. That means how well the athlete was able to maybe understand what they were trying to say, were they able to follow the instructions. And I guess, of course, there's both sides to it, but then for me it was all about just making sure that I followed the instruction, just knew that I believed in my coach. So once that was set aside, the high jump is a really technical event. Why? Because you have to be strong, you have to be fast, you have to be tall. That's a prerequisite, but at the same time you have to be explosive, but without putting on bulk. So you still have to be lean, you have to be skinny, You have to lift heavy weight, but you can't have big quads. So it's a really fine balance of being strong, fit, and fast without being bulky. So that was something that we always worked on. We used to do a lot of plyometric activities. We used to do a lot of jumping in different surfaces, jumping in sand, jumping in grass. Not necessarily on the track all the time. And I think something that really worked in my favor was the high jump has the Fosbury flop as one of the most premier techniques, which is you jump up and then you land on your back. So you do a half somersault over the bar and then you land on your back. But then since we didn't have a high jump pit in our school, it was always about doing the straddle. So you jump off the ground, you do a like a similar to a scissor kick, and then you get on the other side where you have like a sandbox or something, a sand pit. So you land inside the sand pit. So the reason I say that really helped me was usually in young jumpers you see the tendency to turn around and fall on the mat because they know that there's something to protect them. So they usually dive into the mat instead of going up, they go inside the mat. So since I didn't have the luxury of jumping in a mat and I had to land on the sand, and of course if you land on your back on the sand from 6 feet, you're going to break your back. So it was all about how can I jump up and get my feet down again. So that taught me how to have a really effective, strong takeoff, and that helped me eventually progressively learn the Fosbury flop, which came naturally. But then it was all about finding that right takeoff and bringing the speed into the bar, because people usually think you have to have a lot of gymnastic ability to jump high. But then the answer is you just have to be strong and fast, and if you can get over the bar looking funky, it doesn't matter as long as you can jump a high bar. So that was all the high jump, and the training was really catered towards being as fit, as fast and as strong as we can be for that age group, of course, and trying to be efficient.
You were an NCAA athlete as well. So tell me a little bit more about that transition from training in India to training in the States, and how the entire collegiate experience was.
So we were talking about when I was 16 to maybe 15, 16, and cut to when I was 18 years old. That was I was in 11th standard, 12th standard, whatever that is, and by that time I'd broken the men's national record in the high jump, and I was in a position where my goal was to get on a sports quota to maybe Delhi University or one of those universities close to home, and then the perception at that time was once you get into sports quota, you don't have to go to university and the degree comes to your house. You don't have to go and give any exams.
Correct,
that sort of
yes.
thing. So that's the perception that was built, and I was really happy to do that, because for me it was all about just trying to make sure and see how well how good I can do in my sport. And it was never about the academic pursuits that followed, but for my family it was always about trying to stay on top of my academics as well. So somehow I was able to manage to I finished my 12th standard, and I was struggling to make a decision on where I want to go, what I want to do. And incidentally, one of my good friends, and I'm sure Neeraj Chopra, he was in the SAI Sports Authority of India Bangalore camp at that time, and this is 2016, 17, one of those years I believe. He'd broken the world junior record, and there was this coach called Gary Calvert, who was his first international coach, and he was brought in from Australia. So incidentally, I was there on the SAI campus. I met Gary through Neeraj, and then Gary was talking to me about, he was asking me questions, and I was able to talk to him just like we having a conversation. I had a conversation with Gary, and Gary said, you can speak, you can write in English. Have you ever thought about going abroad and competing in the NCAA circuit? I said, hey, I don't know anything about the NCAA, and I mean, my plan was to stay back and just go to Delhi University and that sort of thing. And he said, no, I really think you should go, and you should pursue your passion in the US, and they have a good setup. You don't have to pay out of your pocket. There's you can go on a full scholarship based on your performances. And I said, well, hey, I don't know anything about this, and if that's the case, why don't you send Neeraj? And he said, well, I'm reaching out to you because I think you have the potential to do it and go to the US and that sort of thing. And he's already done really well, so he can stay here, he can get funded, but in your case you still have to do well. So I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but I don't know anything about that process, so if you can help me out, if you can reach out to a few coaches. And he did reach out to a few coaches, and now this is May of 2017, and I get a few responses, and turns out Kansas State, the coach at Kansas State was the best coach that I wanted to go to. And Gary sent me a few profiles. I said, this is the coach that I want to go and train with. And I ended up going to Kansas in August of 2017. The ironic part of the story is, in September I get a phone call from Neeraj saying Gary Calvert passed away. So every time I look back, I think that he just came into my life to guide me and tell me to, go to the US and maybe go there and, find the next phase of your life. And, that shaped the remainder of my life from that point onward. For the next 6-7 years I was in the US, I was under the same coach. All the success that I've been able to achieve in the last few years was because of my training plan in the US for the last 6-7 years. But then all of that, if I'm able to pin it down to maybe one instance, and that has to be tied back to the instance where I met Gary and he said, hey, why don't you go to the US? So it was a very sad situation how it ended, but then he was one of those other sparks that I found in my life to maybe show some light and
almost like an angel that comes
easier.
in at exactly the right time when you need that advice and you're in troubled waters in your mind.
Absolutely,
and not sure where you want to go. You took that call and you went to the States. You started training there specifically for the high jump, right? Training with the Kansas State coach versus training with your Indian coach. What are the biggest differences you saw in preparation?
So going to the US, training with the coach at Kansas State, Cliff Rivelto, he's one of the most accomplished coaches in the field of high jumping. He's coached multiple Olympic medalists, a few Olympic gold medalists in the high jump. Kansas State is known for the high jump. They've had multiple national champions in the NCAA circuit, 16 of them for Kansas State, which is the highest ever in the US. So bottom line, he's a very, very accomplished coach in the high jump. So I was really happy to go there. And the biggest difference that I saw was a really big emphasis on general development as an athlete, because he always said that if you're not an athlete, you can never be a good long jumper, you can never be a good high jumper if you're not an athlete first. So most of fall prep, which is sometime from August till all the way up until when indoor season starts, which is January, we used to do a lot of general conditioning, general strength training, just general exercises to be more robust, strong, fit. And his theory was, if you can do all those things and if you can be strong, fast, athletic, you can jump over a bar no problem. And that worked for me in my first year there. So I got there fall of 2017, which is August, and then in 2018 I broke the national record multiple times for the high jump. So that was a huge shift in training, because now it was all systematic. There was a plan behind everything. And something that I always called my coach in India and told him was that I'm only training for maybe 2-3 hours a day. And he was shocked. He's like, what, you're training here for, I made you training here for 4-5 hours and you're only training for 2-3 hours and you're still able to get the same output. And that's something that I learned, that it doesn't have to be hard work and it can still be smart work.
Exactly.
The biggest thing that I learned in the US was how I can manage my academics and also do sports simultaneously at a high level, which I'd honestly never done here in India. So that was some of the things that I picked up there, and that really helped me in my life forward.
I, as a coach, fear athletes, swimmers that come to me already burnt out at 14. Because of that whole need to have immediate instant success at a very young age, even before they are teenagers. I think you were lucky because you had a family support system that insisted that you were good at other things as well, primarily academics, and then also had the luck of going to America. But within the luck, clearly you've put in the hours and the hard work and the smart work, like you say, that I really wish a lot of coaches would introspect today and figure out ways where they are not holding athletes to 7 and 8 hour training days, but maybe 3 or 4, but doing things that are specific to their sport. And now within that specificity, you're saying that your initial training was very general. While it was all planned, it was also very general, because he believed that you follow a more holistic approach of saying you want to be a well-rounded athlete before, and then a great high jumper will come as a byproduct of it, rather than saying I just want to be an excellent high jumper. I do believe that form of preparation is what also possibly inspired you to taking on the decathlon, right? So did your coach in the States talk to you ever about the decathlon, or was this something that was on your mind once you came back to India?
So, and this is something that I've never had a chat with him about, or even if I did, he's never given me a straight answer. But it's always been subtle, instances here and there about starting to do the combined events. And I don't know if he saw the potential of me being able to do the combined events, or if he just thought that I could do multiple events at a high level. But he never told me that you should switch to the combined events. But there was always instances about, and here I'll get to that in a second. But so there's this thing called a decathlon that we used to do in college, and the decathlon was right after fall prep, which is the general training that I'm talking about. We do that for about 3 months, and then as a team, as a track team, it doesn't have to be, I mean, including throwers, jumpers, sprinters, all of us come together and do the cathathlon. And now you'll ask me, what is the cathathlon? So the cathathlon is a set of few tests that you do. So that covers, so you have a 300-meter run in there. You have the short throw over back, which is 7 kilos. That's the weight of the shot. You have the short throw under forward. Then you have a standing broad jump. You have a standing triple jump. So you jump one leg, other leg, and then you jump into the sand. So there's multiple tests that they check your parameters for strength, check your parameters for power, and those are all some of the things that carry over into your event without actually doing the event. So just some sort of a testing to see where you stand given the 2-3 months of training that you've done. So in that cathathlon test, I had a really good 300-meter split, which eventually propelled him to ask me to be an alternative for the 4x4 team, the relay team in our college. And the college culture is such that to justify a scholarship, they want a scholarship athlete to be able to do multiple events so that they can justify the amount of money that they're giving him or her, or the scholarship that they're able to provide them. So they want you to do multiple events, and they want you to score points for the university. And he saw that I could be a good alternative for the 4x4, and since I could run, and since I could jump high, he also wanted me to do the triple jump. So I slowly started to train for the triple jump and the 4x4 on off days with the high jump. And then since I could triple jump, one fine day is like, what, maybe we should start doing the long jump as well. So then I started doing the long jump. So the condensed form of a decathlon is a heptathlon, which we do indoors. There's two segments to track and field. You have the outdoor competitions like the Olympic Games and that sort of thing. And then you have the indoor segment, which is usually from January to March, because in European countries usually there's a lot of snow. So they can't compete outdoors. So they have this indoor segment, and in indoors, every event is condensed. The 100 meters outdoors becomes a 60 meter indoors. The decathlon outdoors, which is 10 events, becomes a heptathlon indoors, because of course you can't throw the javelin inside or the discus inside. So those events go out. You have 7. So out of the 7, I was already doing 4 or 5 of those. So at that point, it was just about adding a short put in there. So like, what? Why don't you try and do the short put? So that'll cover 6 out of the 7. And the seventh event is only a kilometer, which, I mean, anybody can run, so you can run that. So that's all the 7. And now all we have to do is start picking up the pole vault a little
You
bit.
clearly have, this trend of fishermen coaches who are constantly, playing you and reeling you in.
Exactly. Yeah. No coach ever told me this what you should do, but everybody made me do what they wanted me to do without me knowing it. And I also, being the naive person I am, I kept doing all those events, and I started enjoying doing multiple things, because I mean, for me, I've always believed that as a young kid or as somebody who's learning, when you start picking things up, that's the best feeling. For me, that's a better feeling than winning any medal, is when you really suck at something and then you start picking things up and you start seeing improvement. That feeling is very addictive, and that's something that I felt in doing the pole vault, or maybe the short put, or maybe the long jump, where I didn't know how to do it. And then eventually, after a few practices, because I was fast, I was strong, I was able to pick things up, and that was very addictive, and I wanted to see how far I could push that envelope. So that's how the journey into the transition into the combined event started. And eventually I put together all the 7 events.
We're talking about coaches and how they make you try to do different things, and you've pretty much excelled at everything or that you chose to do or they wanted you to do. But within that whole emotion of success that you felt, what would you say was 1 or 2 instances through training preparation where you felt that, okay, this is my Achilles heel, or this is something that I feel going into the future is going to need a little more intensity of work or attention to?
So since high jump's my primary event, and there's a specific body type for the high jump that you need. I mean, that's the bottom line. You have to have a tall frame, you have to have a lanky, lean frame for the high jump. But then to be able to throw the short put, for example, it has to be completely the opposite. You have to be a bit bulkier. You have to have mass on your body to be able to move the mass, which is the 7 kilo ball. So that was a big challenge, to be able to find that right body type where you're still lean, you're still jumping high, but you're still able to throw the shot far so that you don't lose points. Because in the combined events, in all of the 10 events or the 7 events, if you're doing the heptathlon, it doesn't matter if you finish first, second, third in each event. What matters is your performance score for each event, and the cumulative total is what decides where you rank. So I always knew that I could never throw the shot as far as maybe somebody else in the competition, but I knew that I could cover those points in the high jump because they could never jump as high as I could, because that's my strong event. So I had to make sure to find that ideal body type where at the cost of trying to throw far, I don't lose my points in the high jump, which is where I'm going to get the most points, and that's where the strategies come into the picture. That's where playing to my strengths come into the picture. So those were all things that I eventually learned, eventually figured out, and I feel like I'm still learning those things to not completely follow some athlete who's maybe the world record holder or something like that, but then their body type might be very different, their strong events might be very different. So I have to find the niche for myself, because ultimately it's the cumulative score that matters, and it's not just a few events here and there. So
what I love, what you're saying is typical of all great athletes. Is I started by asking you what is your Achilles heel, and you've converted this whole answer into this is what I'm learning. And you talk as long as you have a learning open mindset towards things that you feel are a challenge, you're always going to find success. You've had the experience of training with a fantastic coach in India. You've trained abroad with possibly one of the world's best in athletics. You're all of 25, but you're speaking like if you took on athletes today as a coach, you'd be great at it, because you've had the exposure of so much knowledge and experience, of course, of competing yourself. Your Instagram page, it would give hurt the ego of a lesser man who is not able to do the sort of stuff you're doing in the gym, which leads me to my next question. You talk about how you have to be versatile in preparation for so many events, and then maybe let something be. You spoke about muscle fibers. You're going from you're pretty much saying that you have to have more medium and fast twitch muscle fibers than try and build up or work on your slow twitch. Your gym exercises on Insta, at least, prove that. Who takes care of your fitness outside of what you do on the track?
So there's many people that I work with. There's just different people that I go for input for. So Inspire Institute of Sport at the JSW facility, which is in Bellary. So that's one of the places where I usually go for my S&C inputs. I work with the coaches there. Especially as an athlete, you get injured a lot. So all the physiotherapy care, injury prevention, all that sort of thing comes from there. So that's one of my, that's like a home away from home, where usually if I'm not in Delhi, I'm probably in Inspire Institute trying to make sure that I'm fit and ready for the next season.
No, I think your grid also inspired me to get to a point where I can do the explosive stuff that you're doing as I get back into my whole fitness routine. But it's so interesting, and I think very important for athletes and coaches to understand that there is not one way up a mountain.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
You've pretty much lived up until now your sporting career life with that mindset where you've prepared, possibly not in the set typical way that athletes prepare for a high jump or for a decathlon, but you found success within it.
I mean, I totally agree with you, and you have to be, and for all the athletes, coaches, everybody tuning in, parents, it cannot come from parents, it cannot come from coaches, it cannot come from siblings, peers. It has to come from within. As an athlete, you have to find those things, those areas that you can find improvement in, because after everything is said and done, after all the dust settles, deep down, where you could have done better, if you gave your all, and no coach, no parent knows what's going on in your mind. That's only you can tell that. So I personally feel if you have that drive if you're just crazy about the sport, if you're just passionate, if that excites you, if that keeps you up at night, you're going to find ways to succeed. But if you're relying on, maybe the best coach in the world, or if you're relying on the best technology, the best wearable out there, whatever it is, that's definitely not gonna, I personally think that's not gonna help you cross the bridge. It has to be that drive, that fire. You fail 10 times, wake up, get up, try again, do something different. And I'm not saying you're not going to be dejected. That's very common. I mean, there's been days when, I've curled up in a ball and, been in my room for hours and hours, but then that's just part of it. You just have to suck it up and move on, I guess.
I had written this quote one day. I thought of interesting things to write on my social media. You personified. I had written, you go from falling asleep to your dreams to waking up to them. And that's, I think you lived your sporting life by it, and many, many great lessons, Tejaswin, from all you have to say. So Tejaswin, you've talked about your preparation, you've talked about transitioning from training in the States back to India. I want to rewind a little to when you were between the age of 15 and 16, 17, you started competing more internationally. You're already India's best when you're a young teenager. What was it like stepping out of Indian soil onto foreign soil and for the first time in your career representing our country's flag?
So the first time I vividly remember, the first time representing India was at the Asian Youth Championships, and this was held in Doha, Qatar. And the selection for that competition was from the youth championships, the national youth championships, and youth for all the viewers is below 18, junior is below 20, and senior of course is for everybody. So at that time I was really excited because that was around that same time. I think 2015-16 was when Bhag Milka Bhag, that movie was released, and that was something that really we I remember all of us at the national camp. We had a 15-day national camp before the team was sent to the Asian Youth Championships, and we all sat together and watched that movie just to get some inspiration, motivation, and we were all young kids. And yeah, it was a great experience representing my country at the Asian Youth Championships. And at that point, obviously, as a kid, you don't really understand the magnanimity of representing your country, competing for your country, and what all those things mean. And I'm glad I didn't know all those things, because I felt like I would have buckled under the pressure of those expectations and that sort of thing. But then something else that I was really happy about was I ended up winning a bronze medal at the Asian Youth Championships, and that was the first time going out of the country for me, representing India in a competition. But then the person who gave me the medal was Qatar's hero in the high jump, which is Mutaz Bashim, and he has the second highest jump in world history. And at that point, he was also growing. He was one of the premier high jumpers in the world at that time, and I was really excited to get my medal from Mutaz Bashim, who was the world champion at that time. And eventually in the following years, he ended up becoming the second highest ever to jump in the high jump, and then became a multiple Olympic medalist. And that's probably my biggest claim to fame, is not winning a bronze at the Asian Youth, but getting my medal from Mutaz Bashim, who's the king of high jump. So that was really a great moment for me.
And he's not necessarily a role model, but he's somebody who inspired you at that point, and also was possibly notching up bigger and bigger wins on his career alongside you. So today we typically look at the people who inspire us, and as role models as people who already walk the walk, and we say, okay, if he can do it, so can I. But in your case, you're looking at an athlete from Qatar who is living his journey alongside you, and in that moment you're saying, okay, if he can do it, so can I, which is what you're saying. 7 years later, you fast forwarding to the Commonwealth Games. You've gone to the Commonwealth, you won a medal. I think it is clearly one of the biggest international medals of your career. Pressure, I feel, was possibly a lot more than it was at the Asian Youth Championship. Tell me a little bit more about that moment.
So going into the Commonwealth Games, a lot had transpired, going into the Commonwealth Games in 2022. By that time, in the high jump, I was pretty established in India. In the US, I'd won the national title. In America, the collegiate title twice. So I was one of the best high jumpers collegiately in America and also in India, and I jumped the A standard for the Commonwealth Games. But then I didn't find my name on the team, when the team was announced. So, I didn't realize what went wrong, and I wasn't on the team to go for the Commonwealth Games. And I had to go to the Delhi High Court and try to, make a spot for me on the team. Eventually, I got, selected for the team, and I got there a couple of days before the Commonwealth Games. So all these things had happened, and I didn't know if I was going to go there, I didn't know if I was going to have that opportunity to compete. But deep down, I knew that if all I needed was an opportunity, and if I got that, I could do something great. But I didn't know that it would turn out into a medal. So eventually, getting there 2-3 days before the finals, and this is a competition that you dream about. Since for the last 4 years, I was at Gold Coast in 2018, and since 2018, I dreamt about going to Birmingham in 2022 for the Commonwealth Games. And up until 4 days before the competition, I didn't even know if I was going or not. And eventually I found out that I was going. I was put on a plane to go to Birmingham. I got there 3 days before the competition, and at that point the only goal for me was to not embarrass myself. And I just didn't know, I didn't have any emotions at that point. I just didn't know what I was here to do. Usually when you go for such big competitions, and it's like a multi-event championship, right? You don't have one sport. You have
Yes.
it's a multi-sport event.
Correct.
So you interact with other team members. There's a games village. You have that games village experience. I didn't have any of that. I got there a few days before. I locked myself in a room because I just wanted to do well and I didn't know what to expect. And going out there, my only goal was to try and clear every height in the first attempt, and that's what luckily I was able to do. And then eventually, right after I finished my, I cleared my last height, which was 2.22 meters, I believe. And I still don't have words to describe how I felt, and it was a great feeling. And eventually, the guy who finished first at the Commonwealth Games, Hamish Kerr from New Zealand, he is the Olympic champion now in 2024. So the level of competition was really high there, and just to be able to win a medal at the Commonwealth Games was nothing short of a spectacle for me.
People move heaven and earth to get to their dreams. You move heaven, earth, and Indian courts. Indian courts, unfortunately. But I can only imagine the sort of pressure you felt leading up into that moment. That now I've made sure I find a spot on this team. It's unfair that you had to. It's ridiculous, really, that you had to do that to get onto your team.
And these are all things that are very common in sport. These are all things that you have to deal with. It's definitely not glory, and it's definitely not all the happiness and all the rainbows and that sort of thing. But then if you're able to deal with these things, I just think that these things build character, builds just the level of the mindset that you can have about what you need to do, how you can get things done. And for me, I was just happy that I was able to get through that phase. And it's very common for everybody to have these phases. Very common to have mental breakdowns, have tough times. But I just think that you have to eventually move on. And I was lucky that I was able to do that.
I locked myself. I didn't lock myself, but I stayed away from the pool after I missed out on qualifying for the 2004 Athens Olympic Games for exactly a month. Wow. So I can only understand what it felt, and the disappointment of not having something that you worked so long toward. But there's no doubt in my mind that just when you speak like an Olympian, you train
that's just the one thing that's missing in
that,
my
and it will come together because you train like an Olympian, you coach like an Olympian as well. So it will come together. It's just not a missing piece of a puzzle. It's already a painting that is in place. You just put those final brushstrokes to it, and it will happen. So just like Moha builds confidence through its range of products, we have with us here Tejaswin, who is an athlete par excellence, and he is a powerhouse of confidence. So he's got goals, you've got goals that are never ending. You call them, a last piece of the puzzle, so to speak, but I don't believe so. I think that just turning Olympian will not be on your list. Winning, I'm guessing, an Olympic medal also someday will be. You are an Asian Games medalist, a Commonwealth Games medalist, and the list goes on. How does an athlete who has already won so much in his career and has found so much success, one, inspire themselves? How do you inspire yourself to keep going? And what are your next immediate short-term and long-term goals?
I think for me, and this is something that always growing up, it's never been actually about aiming for a medal. I'd always, and as the first coach that I was talking to you about, he always told me that, and he's like, medal jeetna hai Olympics mein, like medal jeetna hai Asian Games mein. But then it never was that you want a medal in the high jump, or you want a medal in the decathlon, or what event you want to. So I always, was able to find a way to medal. It didn't have to be an event. All I needed was a medal. That being said, I never really, there's people who, find their kick from, maybe medaling at some of these competitions. For me, it was always about just finding joy in what I do. So if I'm able to find improvement, if I'm able to, if something clicks suddenly in practice, if I'm able to spend 3-4 hours a day on the field, on the ground, just doing what I love, talking to my fellow, athletes, teammates, whatever they're doing, just having a chat, those things bring, I think, ultimate joy to me. And that's probably how I've been able to find, the recipe for success for me. Because if I'm able to do that consistently for many years, I know that going into a competition, it doesn't have to be about trying to chase a medal. The medal will come to me. And that's a mantra that I've been able to, find the right balance for. And that's something that never, so the big moment never amazes me when I'm actually in there. It's always about trying to have a chat with, fellow competitors. It doesn't have to be, my mates, but it can also be from, other countries. And that's something that my experience in the US made me a lot more comfortable, talking to people from other countries, other nationalities, just finding commonalities. And in an event like, the combined events, to get through 2 days, you can't just be in your own shell and get through 2 days doing 10 events. So there's a huge camaraderie that goes on with the combined events athletes, the multi-event athletes. So those are all just things for me. That's how I cope with pressure. That's how I find my success. That's just how things are done for me. It's all very natural. Inside the field, outside the field, I'm the same person. So those are all just things that I try to inculcate from the sport into my life and just be natural. And that's how I feel that I've always been able to find success on the field. But then talking about short-term goals, I definitely think the next year the Asian Championships and World Championships are something that I'm aiming for, aiming to definitely go there, have fun, and the medals will follow. So I'm not going to say that I'm going to go and medal there. I'm going to say that the medal's going to follow my performance. So
fantastic. It's almost like you talk about finding joy within the process of reaching your eventual goal, rather than focusing so much on that eventual goal. It's your way of sort of dissipating pressure and not feeling it when you come up on that moment. This sort of confidence also comes, it's not arrogance really, it also comes from preparation and knowing what you're doing to prepare to finding that joy and expectation of that perfect pole vault and that new record that you want to hit. I would believe that you've had exposure to conversations with some of the best athletes, not only in India and the world. You mentioned Neeraj, and the impact that he's had on athletics is phenomenal, inspiring a whole generation of athletes. Tell me a little bit more about if you've had deeper conversations with him, and also there is a New Zealand athlete that you've also interacted with. Aaron Booth is his name. So just these two athletes, if you could just talk about how they've had some sort of impact on you, and if yes, what was it?
So Aaron was, he's the he was the World University Games champion in the decathlon, but we trained a lot together at Kansas State because he was a student there as well when I was in school. And he was one of the reasons why I, started doing the combined events, because, since in the fall, in the, the early preparatory phase, we all do the same things. I used to beat him in the decathlon. I used to run faster than him. I used to throw farther than him, and I used to jump farther than him. And he was still on the roster as a decathlete, and I was a high jumper, and I was still able to do all these things better than him. So naturally, I thought, what kind of an athlete is he? He sucks, because if I can beat him in all these events and I'm not even a combined events athlete, then what good is he? So he's like, well, I'm gonna give you a challenge. Why don't you put together all 7 events and do a heptathlon if you think that way? And I was like, that's how naive I was, and I was like, yes, of course, I'm going to do that. I'm going to beat you. And in the first 4 events, I had a massive lead. But the moment the pole vault came around, he completely swung those. My lead was dissipated, and then I lost the combined events competition, because ultimately that's when I learned, that was my first lesson in the combined events, that it doesn't matter how good you are in 1, 2, 3. What matters is how much lead you can get in each events, and the margin of how you play the scoring tables. And that was something that I learned from him. And then we are really good friends till date. And there's been similar instances with a lot of athletes like this, but all of them have been learning experiences for me. And then interacting with, especially somebody like a Neeraj or Mondo Duplantis for that matter, who broke the pole vault world record. He was also in University of LSU when I was in college. And that was the year when he finished second at the NCAA championships, and that's unheard of for Mondo to finish second. But then those things happen. So these are all lessons that I picked up along the way. And somebody like Neeraj, for that matter, he usually comes across as he's very jovial, casual. He doesn't really think about his sport. But when you interact with him, he's so detail oriented, and the history of the sport, or like maybe the technical inputs that he's trying to analyze himself, the awareness that he has about his own training regimen, about his body, about his the way he throws the javelin is just second to none. And that these are all factors that show why some of these guys are the best in what they do. And I think that's one of the traits that I've learned from all these people, is you just have to be a student of the sport. It doesn't matter if you're a Neeraj Chopra, if you're a multiple time Olympic medalist. If you're not a student, the day you stop being a student, that's the day when you stop willing. So the more you can try and learn, the more you can find parallels in different sports, different events, not just sport, outside of sport, doing different things. That's always going to help you. And
it's always going to serve you well. Your mind is open, your ears are open, and your ego is shut down. I always believe that I had no ego when I was learning, but when I was competing, I had the biggest ego in the world.
Sport has consumed a lot of my life. For the last 10-15 years, I've been in competitive sport. But then outside of sports, something that me and my fiance were really passionate about is we founded this group. It's a startup. It's called King Sports Group. And what we do is, since I got really lucky with that coach who sent me to the US, we help athletes like myself, when they are in that age group of 16, 17, 18 years old. We try to scout them young. We try to go to competitions whenever I have free time, whenever my fiance has time. She goes to competitions, and we try to pick all these athletes. We try to pitch the idea of going and competing in US collegiate sports, negotiate scholarships, and we try to, since I've competed there for a while, I know coaches there, and we try to get those coaches to India, try to have these kids the opportunity to go and compete at that high level, because I've always believed that for me, especially when I went to the US, I was all about, I have 4 years, I'm going to find out, I'm going to compete with the best athletes, and I'm going to find out if this is made for me or not. And if not, at the end of 4 years, I'll have a clear answer that, hey, this is not for me and I have to move on in life. And that's something that I think whoever aligns with that mindset of not doing sport for 15, 20 years at an average level, but if they want to be really good, they have to throw themselves in the deep end and see if that's for them. So that's an opportunity that we try to provide, and that's something I guess that's my way of giving back to the sport without asking a lot of money from anybody or the government or that sort of thing. So
it's fantastic. I think it is something that every teenager needs, every teenage athlete needs, because I remember when I was 16, I had to decide, do I want to pursue engineering in Bangalore, or do I want to take on a slightly easier academic course and attempt qualifying for the Olympics. But I had no professional counseling other than, of course, the support from my coach or my parents, but I knew what their opinions were, and we discussed this with them every day. So I think outside of that home environment where you have that advice for you to be building and doing something that is for those athletes who are in that phase of limbo where they are not sure where to go, whether we stay back in India or we go abroad, is huge. It is no hiding from the fact that when you're in part of sport and at this level, intense for over a decade as you have been, it has to at some level take some sort of toll on your mental health. So just to start off with, what has your journey been with mental health, say, over the last 4 or 5 years?
I mean, two instances we already talked about today. One was, right before the Olympic Games, when I found out that I didn't qualify, and one was, right before the Commonwealth Games, when I had to go through all those things to just make the team. So mental health, growing up, I never really thought about these things, and I always thought that you just have to move on. But then over time, I realized that it's something that you just have to really pay a lot of attention to, because even you don't understand when you start slipping into self-doubt, slipping into factors where you just don't know if something's meant for you, and you start questioning yourself. And I think the biggest especially for an athlete, or for anybody for that matter, if you start questioning yourself, if you start questioning your abilities, you're never going to be able to execute yourself at a high level, execute your skills at a high level, because sport is all about being over optimistic, and when you have a pessimistic mindset, it's not going to work out. So for me, it was always about trying to make sure that finding the right balance between what I do on the track and make sure that I don't do too much, and give myself some off time, do things outside of the sport, go for walks, just have friends to chat about something else outside of sport, apart from sport, and finding that right balance. And this is something that's worked for me. Everybody might have a different outlook to this. Everybody might have a different way of coping with their stress, but I would definitely suggest, especially in today's world with social media and Instagram and all that sort of thing, people put out content, you just don't know what is right, what is wrong, and you start comparing yourself to people sitting across the globe, and you don't even know what they're doing. So it's really important to get that downtime, really important to trust your process, have something that's set for you, have something that you believe in, and just keep doing that, and then you'll definitely see results. There's no reason why you should be afraid about this.
Have you had conversations with people within your field, ex-athletes, champions or coaches, when you have been completely down in the dumps, where you felt like you do need help or somebody to talk to, or are you somebody who tends to want to internalize it and just deal with it yourself?
No, many times I'm a very chatty guy, especially when it comes to any topic for that matter. I'm always somebody who's gonna one of those annoying people who just goes to random people and just asks things. Especially if it's an athlete, especially if it's a coach, I'm always around them, especially if they are somebody that I feel that I can get something out of them. I'm always around them, asking random questions here and there, just like a fly, trying to get some insight or something about anything. So usually when I'm feeling low or when I'm dealing with something that I know somebody else has dealt with, I always reach out to them. I'm always trying to, and it's not direct. That's my I think that's something that's specific to me. I don't ever reach out directly to anybody. It's always starting about something else and then slowly delving into what I really want to talk about. And the close friends, they always understand the reason why I'm contacting them, messaging them, and it's not because of the reason that I'm mentioning. So I think it's really important for me to find those people and find somebody that I can confide in, find those answers. And I've always believed that it's a collaborative effort, and there's no one man, and there's no self-made man. There's always circumstances, there's always people, there's always situations that make somebody, and you can't ever be self-made. That's what I feel.
Yeah, you talk about locking yourself up in a room a lot, but you are an athlete of an outdoor sport. What is your journey of mental health been like with skincare, for example? Because you are outside, do you use skincare, or do you have any sort of routine that helps you also de-stress from the pressures of your sport?
So this is something that I actually tried at the Asian Games. Somebody told me before the competition, and like I have always have conversations with friends. Somebody gave this line. They said, "If you look good, you feel good, you're gonna do good." So that really stuck with me. And throughout the Asian Games, I made a video log of my competition before each event, during each event. I was video logging right after the competition. So without any expectation of what the result's going to be. And this is the Asian Games, right? So you're expected to lock in, be focused, and that sort of thing. But I was here with my camera right after I finished my event, one of my events, and I was like, hey, this is how I felt, da 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 da. And I go into my room, put some cream on my face, and that's something, that's just my way. That was my way at that time of coping with the pressure of competing at such a big event. So that got a lot of views, that got a lot of likes, and I cried on one of the videos there because I had gotten a PB which I wasn't expecting, a personal best there. I didn't expect that, and I had that. So it was a raw footage of all the emotions that I went through. And there's a really good clip at the very end of me. So we you know how you have those training tapes that you put on your skin, and there's one video of me just completely ripping it off and just yelling. So there's just different aspects, and skincare is definitely part of it for me. To be honest, I don't really spend a lot of time in a day looking after my skin and that sort of thing, but then maybe something like a sunscreen, that's something that I usually especially when I'm going out, that's something that I usually.
And Delhi can't be easy with
Delhi
the heat
can't
and
be
training. So Tejaswin, you talked very briefly about your startup venture, King Sports Group, and how you are engaging with athletes, sort of mentoring them and helping them when they are confused in that transitional phase of education, India vis-a-vis abroad, sport, India vis-a-vis abroad. Where do you see, because you've had so much exposure to some of the best coaches in the world and also the best minds in the world within your sport. Tell me a little bit more about how you feel exposure to this sort of training can impact young athletes, and how it helped you to start off with amassing so much experience.
Circling back to what we talked about earlier, joy. So that's something that I always believe as a young athlete, even up until maybe 16, 17 years old, if you don't love what you do, if you don't have the passion for what you do, your parents wanting you to do something or your coach wanting you to do something is never going to work out. So that's something that we always try to tell the athlete, especially if there's somebody who's younger. They come to us, they're like, hey, we want our kid to go to the US, we want them to compete at the NCAA level. I was like, well, what does the kid want to do? That's something that's very important to us, and usually there's something that the parents want, there's something that the coaches want, and there's things that the kids want to do. So if all three align, that's when you usually see good results. You see them succeed, and they're able to find the joy because they're doing what they're doing for themselves. But then if that doesn't happen, that doesn't align, we have to find a way for that to align and for those expectations to be on the same page. So that's usually something that that's the first thing that we try to identify, and to make sure that we have all the stakeholders in place and find out why we are doing what we are doing. If it's high jump, for an instance, why do you want to high jump? What's your end goal? Is it to go to US university? Is it to win a medal at the Olympic Games, or is it just because you're having fun? So if the answer is C, then those are the kids that I usually like to work with, because they are doing what they're doing because they find love with they already have the passion for what they're doing.
So you're engaging with kids, youngsters who choose sport because they are having fun at it. There has been almost a resurgence of Indian athletics, which started with, of course, past champions, but Neeraj Chopra in particular, who is breaking barriers, who has set the bar at the highest level. Where do you see your athletics, Indian athletics, going in the future?
I think, I mean, there's just a huge potential, and that was very prominent right after Neeraj won the gold medal at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, which happened in 2021 due to COVID. Right after that, in 2022 at the Commonwealth Games, I think there were 6, 7, 8 medals in athletics, and before that there was maybe one medal in the Commonwealth Games, which Milkha Singh ji had won back in the 50s in athletics. So there was a huge shift in the perspective, and that was not because of coaching change or maybe there was a structural change that happened in the sport, but a lot of it was because all of us athletes who were maybe tier 2 at that point, we saw Neeraj do something that we all thought was maybe a mental block, a barrier that nobody could ever do, and we saw somebody just going out there, not just winning a medal, winning a gold medal. So that just I think that broke a lot of shackles, a lot of mental barriers for a lot of us athletes, and that probably for me and all the other medalists that I had talked to at that point, after the Commonwealth Games, they all had the one thing that was common for all of us was the fact that Neeraj's experience, and the fact that if he can do that at the Olympic level, why can't we do that at the Commonwealth Games level? And yeah, that was something that really was a turning point for Indian athletics, I would say, the gold in Tokyo. But after that, I think now, I mean, the path is set, and the benchmark is really high. So for all of us, there's no reason to not have the inspiration. We have a really inspiring figure among us who's a peer of who's competed with all of us. So I think it's really easy from this point on for all of us to give our best and do really good. And I personally feel that starting from 2020, we've started the golden era of Indian athletics, and going on for the next 15, 20, 30 years, I don't know how far, but we're probably going to see the peak of our sport in India.
So we play smart, and today we are going to think fast in our rapid fire round brought to you by Moha Sunscreen. So Tejaswin, lots of high pressure. You have not prepared for this moment, I'm sure, because you do not know these questions. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. Favorite pre-game meal?
Skittles.
Messi or Ronaldo?
Oh wow. I think I did see Zlatan somewhere here, so I'm going to say Zlatan because I think Messi's very talented. Ronaldo's a hard worker, but you usually are attracted to something that you are not, and I'm not arrogant, and I'm really attracted to that, so Zlatan is...
Okay, good answer. if you weren't an athlete, what would you be?
A lawyer.
Do you prefer spray, lotion or sticks sunscreen?
Well, that's the first time I'm hearing about sticks sunscreen. I didn't know that existed, but spray is probably the easiest. Spray.
A track or field event apart from a high jump?
Pole vault.
Who inspires you the most?
My mother.
What is one sport apart from your own that you feel if you had pursued you would be great at?
I'm playing a lot of pickleball these days, so I definitely think pickleball is something that I can be really good at.
What is your favorite song to get hyped or excited to pre-event?
That I can't give a rapid fire answer to that because it really depends on the situation. If I'm really feeling tensed, I like listening to calm music. So some of the English music that I listen to is I like Frank Sinatra. But if I'm really feeling low, if I'm feeling, if I want to excite myself, I listen to a lot of Bon Jovi.
What do you do on your typical day off?
Nothing.
And what is one thing, if your fans got to know about you, they'd be surprised by?
I don't know. I feel like they know everything about me at this point.
So Tejaswin, it was fantastic having you here, talking to you, picking your brain, and hearing all your answers which you gave with such honesty. It was amazing, I'm sure, for our listeners, and for that we'd like to thank you with a small hamper from Moha. It's got a bunch of goodies, including sunscreen spray that you will definitely need in Delhi for sure. Not sure about Bellary, but Delhi for sure. Good luck with all your training. It's for you. Yeah, and I'd like to, I've had the good fortune of speaking to several athletes on our show, world-class athletes, fantastic minds. But for you specifically, I want to say that, in the rapid fire, you mentioned Zlatan and you said that I look up to him or whatever it is because he's arrogant and I am not. But what you are, and I'm sure viewers will also take back from this, is there is no arrogance, but there is arrogance bordering, not arrogance but self-confidence, a quiet confidence that borders on arrogance that I think you have deep inside you. You are laid back and easygoing, but I fear for your competitors once they see that switch go off and you become that animal athlete that I'm sure you are on your track and field. You use words like perfect balance in your answers, but you also are the perfect athlete, not only just physically but mentally, and more than mentally, your whole approach to competitive sport in general. You say you're not sure of whether you want to be a coach in the future because you've got goals that are first to compete and win at the Olympic Games, and I'm sure you will reach many of them. But do think of also at some point mentoring, guiding and coaching the future generation, because your academy will probably have the best athletes in the country, but more than that, they'll be having the most fun. And that is what I loved from all you said today. I think I absolutely love that you've lived a career that has been full of joy and fun already. And when I talk to young athletes today, I always tell them that 20 or 30 years from now, conversations at your dinner table with your family will not be had holding medals in their hand or Olympic tattoos or rings on your back, but it will be of the memories and the journeys that you went through to get to where you are today in your life. So whether you're going to the corporate world or whether you're going to mentoring or whatever else you do, I hope you continue, and I'm sure you will inspire generations of young athletes from India to play sport and to live life the way you have. You've been very lucky, but you've also I think capitalized fully on that luck or the good fortune of doing what it is you do today. So from all of us here in the studio, we are inspired. There was never a doubt in my mind that we wouldn't be, but we are also, you forced me to go down a road of looking at life maybe from a slightly different perspective, that while I always wanted to as a kid have an Olympic medal, I want to play at an international tournament as a golfer someday, but maybe I should focus a little bit more on walking the road that leads to your eventual goal, and just not focusing on that trophy at the end of it. So thank you for that, for reminding all of us and me also of finding joy in the journey as you do every day. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. I feel just a little bit embarrassed, but
that was the whole idea of this.
Yeah, I should have walked out just before you started your monologue about how inspired you are. I mean, you should have said that without me being here. I feel like I've done something, but especially coming, all these things coming from you, you've accomplished a lot in your life, and it means a lot to me. And this is definitely something that I feel like to me it's like passing off a baton. You've done so much in your life, and it's kind of like those words are like a baton in our sport, track and field. It's like passing on a torch to me, and as the next generation to maybe carry on your legacy, carry on what you have achieved in your life, maybe try and become an iota of what you have done in your lustrous career. So I'm really proud and really happy that of all the kind words that you had to share. So really thankful and very humble. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
It was fantastic speaking to and listening to Tejaswin Shankar today, one of India's finest and greatest athletes. When you look at his build, when you look at his frame, he reminds me of Michael Jordan. I really wonder why he didn't take up basketball as a sport. And also a quote that Michael Jordan said, his life truly embodies it, which is, I've missed more than 9,000 times in my career. I've lost over 300 games, 26 times I've been trusted to take the winning shot, and I've failed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I've succeeded. Tejaswin's career is actually full of success with a very little disappointment and failure. The one thing that he feels is left unfinished are the Olympic Games, to turn Olympian and win a medal for himself and his nation. The Olympic Games stands on the motto Citius Altius Fortis, and he embodies and personifies all three: faster, higher, stronger. He's fast and he wants to get faster, he jumps high and he wants to jump higher, and he's definitely strong. Not only strong in body and spirit, but also in mind. And I believe that strength comes from what all my viewers today should come back to and take as the biggest lesson moving forward, which is he found his strength from finding love and joy in what he chose to do. And that is why he succeeds.